Okay, welcome to the tutorial on getting started with Harpoon. I'm just going to go over the user interface a little bit, maybe give you a few tips on how to get the most out of your normal maps that you create with the software. Now you can't see the menu because the recording software is locked to this window here, but it's pretty simple. The file menu only has four options. It's New, Load, Save, and Export. If you click on New, that's going to prompt you to open up an image, and that's the image that you want to make the normal map from. If you click on Load or Save, that's to load or save a material that you have created from within Harpoon that you can then load and tweak later. And if you click on Export, that's going to save the file out to a normal map image that you can import into your 3D software. Okay, now what we're going to do is talk about the view here, the texture view. It's basically only got two options, but let me load up image real quick so you can see something that's going on. I created this project earlier. We'll just load this one. Here you can see the texture is at its actual size, so I have to scroll around to look at it a little bit. We can tell Harpoon to fit it into the window there, which isn't really a problem for this small texture, but if you have a larger texture, then it's going to get really tiny in comparison to its actual size and make it a little harder to see the details. So you'll probably want to work on actual size most of the time. Okay, now we can click on over to the 3D view here, and you can see this is it's normal mapped. You have options on this side here to go ahead and turn it into a cube, a cylinder, or a plane. I'm going to stick with the sphere because I like the way the sphere looks. And these options here allow you to control how it is presented to you. If you want to see what effect the normal map is having, you can turn it on and off, and you can say, okay, that's making it look more 3D there. If you just want to see the normal map, you can turn off the diffuse, and you won't see the actual texture. You'll just see the normal map that's been created over here in the texture view. Okay, you can also turn off the lights, the color of the lights anyhow, because those are colored to let you see how it looks under different lighting conditions. And you can turn off the specular. You'll lose a lot of the detail that way. You probably want to turn that on because in the game you're probably going to have some specular lighting in there. But it can help you get a flatter sense of how it looks, get a better view of what it looks like sometimes. Okay. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the controls here. If you use the left mouse button, you can rotate your object around. I'm going to turn this back on. You can rotate the object around. If you use the right mouse button, it'll reset it back to where it was. And if you scroll the mouse wheel, it'll zoom it in and out. And again, the right mouse button resets it. Now, if you hold down the shift key in the left mouse button, you'll move it around like this here. And shift and right mouse button will allow you to move the lights around. Moving left and right will rotate them around like they do on their own if you leave them alone. And moving up and down will move them up and down in the scene. So you can get a better view of what your object looks like under different lighting circumstances. And also shift and mouse wheel will change the tiling on the UVs. And again, right mouse button to reset. Okay, another thing you can do is press the space bar. As long as this box here is the one that's focused on, you can press the space bar and it'll pause the animation. That way you can move it around and look at certain things without worrying about it moving on you there. And spacebar again to unpause. Again, this has to be focused. If you go ahead and click down here on normal, then normal gets the focus, and pressing spacebar will switch in between those. So just click on this to give it the focus, and spacebar will pause it for you. Okay, now I want to talk about the detail sliders over here. The important thing to note is that it works by adding all of these values up, and then it uses that to determine what percentage each one affects the scene by. So it's best if you turn them down to begin with. I'm going to turn these down here. Now it's all at 0, obviously nothing's contributing anything. If you turn the smallest all the way up, then you'll see all the small details coming out. If you go ahead and turn that back down. If you turn the largest up on this particular image, it just kind of looks blurry. It varies by the image that you're using, so we're going to turn this down and use large instead. And then you see a little bit more of the details come out there. So it's best, what I like to do is to leave the small and the large at 0, although in this case it may be, medium at 0. Leave some of them at 0 so there's less things contributing to it until you get a nice baseline that you like. And then you can go ahead and start bringing the other values in to get something that you like out of it. But it helps to rough it out if you're not trying to adjust a lot of values that are making the other values more subtle, if that makes sense. And you got the X and Y axis here. Different 3D programs require different coordinate systems for the normal maps. Unity uses up right, that's what the default is for the program. You can change it to up left or down left or whatever combination of the above. Okay, now I want to talk a bit about how the depth and intensity sliders work. They kind of sound like they're similar, and they are similar, but you'll notice depth is in pre-processing and intensity is in post-processing. What happens is depth is what gets passed to the function that actually creates the normal map, and it tells it how deep that it should be. And intensity works by overlaying the normal map that you've created and blurring it a little bit. The value is the percentage of that you want to add back in. So you can see you can really see the difference if you go ahead and take the depth, go ahead and turn depth all the way up and intensity all the way down. And you'll see how it looks that way. And then you turn depth kind of low. You can't turn it all the way down or there won't be anything to intensify. And then you go ahead and turn the intensity all the way up. And you'll see that the only parts that are intensified are the parts that are actually in this image here. Whereas with depth, it's going to intensify the underlying image that's made up of these values. So when you do it, you get a lot more of those small details that you didn't get when you turn the intensity value up. And in an actual project, you're probably not going to turn the intensity up as high as I did here. That's a bit ridiculous, but I mean, you can play with that, but it's important to note the different way in that the depth and the intensity work, so you can compare and contrast how they play off of one another to get the best effect for what you're going after. I want to show you one other difference between depth and intensity, or one way to work with them together. I've loaded up an image here, expressly designed to demonstrate this point. What we're going to do is we're going to turn the depth all the way up. And you'll see how it's got this stepped effect to it. We obviously don't want that in our normal map, and there's two ways we can fix it. First is we can go and turn the smoothing up, and that kind of takes care of it. You could add some sharpening if that gets too smooth for you. The sharpening filter takes a little bit of a while. See, that added some of it back in, so we don't want that either. But the sharpening filter's there for, images where it won't do that. We're going to turn this back down. We're going to look at the other way to fix it, and that is to turn the depth down to something modest, and then turn the intensity up instead. And you'll see, well, that's a little too high. But you can see that the intensity gets rid of the stepping effect. You want to balance it out. Again, it's just, like I said before, you look at the perfect balance between the depth and intensity and how they work and play together. So you can get the depth that you want without the detail that you don't want. There, that's a little bit better. So just keep that in mind when you're playing around with the depth and the intensity. Keep in mind how they complement one another as well as how they contrast with one another. Okay, now I want to talk a little bit about the high pass filter. I've loaded up new material here. This is marble tile, and you can see that this is just a diffuse texture. I've got the normal turned off, but you can imagine the problem that's going to create, because it's going to think that all of these marble discolorations are depth, as you can see here when we look at this view. And if we go back here and we turn the normal map on instead, you'll see it's all bumpy, and marble isn't bumpy like that, it's smooth. So in order to fix that, we can just go and turn on the high pass filter, and you can see it takes care of that for us. Now, it isn't very precise, the high pass filter. It's better, you might have to use Photoshop to come in and do some tweaks, but that's there just as a little extra, and it might help you take care of something without having to pre-process it in Photoshop first. So that's something to try if the need arises. The last thing we need to cover is the export function. As I said before, the file menu isn't visible because the screen capture software is focused on this window here. But basically, you go up to File, Export, and it's going to ask you for a file name. By default, it'll save it as a PNG file. You can add another extension to that, and it'll try to save it as that file format instead. And that about does it for the tutorial. It didn't turn out as well as I hoped it did. This is my first video tutorial. I'll try to improve my workflow a little bit and learn to work with the software for screen capture a little bit better as I make additional tutorials for this software. So thanks for watching.